The small diner at the corner of Elm Street was nothing special, just a quiet place with peeling paint, flickering neon lights, and the smell of coffee that had been brewing for too long. The owner, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes but a warm smile, wiped the counter for what felt like the 100th time that evening. Business had been slow for months, and she was barely scraping by. But she never complained. She had learned long ago that life wasn't fair, and sometimes, all you could do was keep going. That night, as the wind howled outside, she noticed a boy sitting alone at one of the booths. He looked no older than 16, his clothes worn, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. He hadn't ordered anything, just sat there, staring at his hands. She had seen him before, lingering around the neighborhood, always alone. Her heart ached. She knew hunger when she saw it. Without a word, she slid a plate of hot food in front of him, a cheeseburger, fries, and a glass of milk. The boy looked up, startled. "Eat," she said softly. "No charge." He hesitated, then nodded gratefully, devouring the meal like he hadn't eaten in days. She didn't ask questions. She just let him eat in peace, refilling his glass when it emptied. When he finished, he whispered, "Thank you," before slipping out into the night. She didn't expect to see him again. But the next evening, he returned. And the next. And the next. Each time, she fed him. Each time, he thanked her quietly before leaving. Then, one rainy night, everything changed. As she was closing up, the sound of engines roared outside. Bright headlights flooded the diner's windows. She stepped outside, her breath catching as luxury cars, black, sleek, expensive, lined the street. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out of the lead car. His face was serious, his eyes scanning the diner before landing on her. "You're the woman who's been feeding my son," he said. Her heart pounded. She had no idea who this man was, but the way he carried himself screamed power. The boy stepped out from behind him, no longer in ragged clothes but dressed sharply, his chin lifted. "You were kind to me when no one else was," the boy said. "My father wants to thank you properly." She stood frozen, unsure what to say. The man pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Inside was a check, enough money to change her life forever. But before she could react, he said something that shocked her even more. "This isn't just about money," he said. "We need to talk about who you really are." And just like that, her quiet, ordinary life was about to take a turn she never saw coming. The woman stared at the check in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. The numbers on it were more than she had ever seen in her life, enough to pay off the diner's debts, fix the leaking roof, and maybe even take a real vacation for the first time in years. But it wasn't the money that made her heart race. It was the man's words. "We need to talk about who you really are." What did that mean? She was just a diner owner, a nobody. She had no secrets, no hidden past. At least, none that she could remember. The boy, now standing tall, no longer the hungry, hunched-over kid she had fed, gave her a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay," he said. "You can trust him." The man in the suit gestured toward one of the cars. "Please," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "There's something you need to hear." She hesitated. Everything in her screamed to refuse, to go back inside her diner and lock the door. But curiosity, and maybe a little hope, made her nod. She grabbed her coat and stepped into the car, the leather seat softer than anything she had ever touched. As the car pulled away, the man finally introduced himself. "I'm sorry for the suddenness of all this," he said. "But when my son told me about you, I had to meet you myself." She glanced at the boy. "Why?" "I just gave him some food. Anyone would have done the same." The man shook his head. "No. Not anyone." He paused, then dropped the bombshell. 25 years ago, you saved another lost boy. And that boy was me. Her breath caught. Memories flickered in the back of her mind, fragments of a life she had almost forgotten. She had worked at a different diner back then, in a rougher part of town. There had been a skinny teenager who came in often, always alone, always avoiding eye contact. She had fed him too, sneaking him extra slices of pie when her boss wasn't looking. But that was so long ago. How could this wealthy, powerful man be the same boy? I didn't have much back then, he continued. But your kindness stuck with me. It gave me hope when I had none. I swore that if I ever made something of myself, I'd find you and repay you. She didn't know what to say. The past felt like a dream, something that happened to someone else. The car stopped in front of a massive house, more like a mansion, with tall gates and perfectly trimmed hedges. The man turned to her. This is my home. And if you'll allow it, I'd like it to be yours too, at least for tonight. There's more to discuss. She stepped inside, her old sneakers sinking into plush carpets. Everything was grand, elegant, nothing like her tiny apartment above the diner. The boy, now grinning, pulled out a photo album from a drawer. Look, he said, handing it to her. Inside were pictures of the man, her old diner customer, through the years. Newspaper clippings of his success, charity events, family photos. And in one faded picture at the back, there she was, younger, smiling behind the counter of that old diner, unaware that her small act of kindness would one day come full circle. Her eyes welled up. I don't understand why you're doing all this. The man sat across from her, his expression serious again. Because it's not just about repaying a debt, he said. I need your help. And in return, I can give you the life you deserve. She tensed. My help? With what? He leaned forward. There's a diner like yours in every town. And in every diner, there's someone like you, someone who feeds the hungry without asking for anything in return. I want to find them. And I want you to help me. She blinked. Why? Because the world needs more people like you, he said simply. And for the first time in years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change in ways she never imagined. The woman sat frozen in the plush chair, the photo album still open in her lap. Her mind raced. This man, this stranger who had once been a hungry boy in her diner, wanted her help? It didn't make sense. She was just a woman who served coffee and scrambled eggs. She wasn't special. The boy, sensing her hesitation, sat beside her. You don't have to decide right now, he said gently. But my dad's telling the truth. What you did, it matters. The man, his father, leaned back, studying her face. I know this is a lot, he said. But let me explain properly. He poured her a cup of tea from a silver pot, the steam curling into the air between them. After I left that diner all those years ago, I got lucky. A man saw something in me, gave me a job, taught me about business. I worked hard, built my own company. But I never forgot where I came from. His voice grew quieter. And I never forgot you. She wrapped her hands around the warm teacup, grounding herself. That's kind of you. But why now? After all this time? The boy answered instead. Because I ran away. Her head snapped up. What? He looked down at his hands. 2 months ago. Things at home were complicated. I ended up on the streets. And then I found your diner. His voice cracked slightly. You didn't ask questions. You just saw me. The father's jaw tightened. When he came home and told me about the woman who fed him, I knew it had to be you. The same way you helped me. He leaned forward. Don't you see? This isn't coincidence. It's something else. The woman's chest ached. She thought of all the lonely nights in her diner, all the times she'd wondered if her life meant anything at all. And now here were two people telling her it did, that her small acts of kindness had echoed across decades. "But this plan of yours," she said slowly. "Finding other diners, other people like me, what would that even look like?" The man's eyes lit up. He pulled out a tablet and showed her a map dotted with glowing pins. "These are small, family-owned diners across 5 states. Places just like yours, where the food might not be fancy, but the people are real." He zoomed in. "I want to fund them. Keep them from closing. Help them feed anyone who walks in hungry, no questions asked." She stared at the screen. It was crazy. Impossible. And yet. "How?" she breathed. "With your help," he said simply. "You know these places better than anyone. You know what they need. And more importantly," he smiled slightly, "you'll know which owners will actually care about the people they're feeding." The weight of what he was asking settled over her. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust. About choosing who got to be part of something bigger. The boy nudged her shoulder playfully. "Say yes. It'll be fun." She almost laughed. Fun? This was life-changing. Terrifying. But as she looked around the lavish room, at the boy's hopeful face, at the man's steady gaze, she realized something startling. For the first time in years, she wanted to say yes. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally. "And I'll need to see this operation of yours. Make sure it's real." The man nodded immediately. "Of course. Tomorrow, I'll show you everything." He stood, offering his hand. "For tonight, you're our guest. Your room is ready whenever you'd like to rest." As a maid led her upstairs to a bedroom bigger than her entire apartment, the woman's head spun. This couldn't be real. Any minute now, she'd wake up in her tiny bed above the diner, the alarm clock blaring for another ordinary day. But the silk sheets under her fingers were real. The view of the city lights from her window was real. And the strange, fluttering feeling in her chest, that was real too. For the first time in decades, she felt seen. And that was more terrifying than any luxury car or mansion. Morning light streamed through the unfamiliar curtains, pulling the woman from a restless sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then the plush bedding and the faint scent of lemon polish reminded her. The mansion. The check. The impossible offer. She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, suddenly self-conscious about her faded jeans and worn sneakers in this palace of wealth. When she opened her bedroom door, the boy was waiting in the hallway, bouncing on his heels. "You're awake. Come on, Dad's making breakfast." The kitchen was all gleaming stainless steel and marble, but the rich man stood at the stove like any ordinary father, flipping pancakes in an old band t-shirt. He grinned when he saw her. "Hope you're hungry. I don't get to cook much anymore." The normalcy of it loosened the knot in her chest. As they ate at the sunlit breakfast nook, pancakes stacked high, syrup dripping onto expensive china, the man laid out his plans between bites. "There's a diner in Harrisville, about 2 hours from here. Owner's a Vietnam vet named Joe. Place is falling apart, but he still gives free meals to homeless vets every Tuesday." He slid a photo across the table, a squat building with a cracked parking lot, its neon sign missing letters. "This is where we start." She studied the picture. "What exactly would I do?" "Come with me today. Meet Joe. Help me convince him we're not some corporate sharks trying to buy him out." He wiped his mouth. "People trust you. They'll see you're one of them." The boy nudged the syrup toward her. "And you get to ride in the helicopter." She nearly choked on her orange juice. "Helicopter?" The man waved a hand. "Faster than driving. Don't worry, it's perfectly safe." 2 hours later, she was gripping the seat as the chopper lifted off from the mansion's lawn, her stomach lurching. Below them, the city shrank to toy-sized buildings. The boy whooped with excitement beside her, while his father pointed out landmarks through the headset. "You okay?" the man asked, noticing her white-knuckled grip. She forced a nod. "Just never left the ground before. Unless you count the time my diner's stool collapsed." He laughed, and somehow, that made the flight easier. Harrisville appeared below them, a tired town with more potholes than cars. The helicopter landed in an empty field near the diner, drawing a small crowd of curious onlookers. As they walked toward the building, the woman noticed the peeling paint, the crooked screen door. It was like looking at her own diner's twin. Inside, an old man with a military haircut glared at them from behind the counter. "We don't serve fancy suits here," he grumbled. The woman stepped forward before the rich man could speak. "How about a fellow diner owner?" She extended her hand. "I run the Elm Street Grill over in Millwood." Joe's eyes narrowed, but he shook her hand. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man his age. "What's with the entourage?" The rich man cleared his throat. "Mr. Joe, we'd like to—" "Let me," the woman interrupted. She slid onto a stool, the vinyl cracking under her weight. "Joe, how much does a cup of coffee cost here?" $2.50. "Why?" She nodded toward a scruffy man dozing in a corner booth. "You charged him anything today?" Joe's face softened slightly. "That's Charlie. He don't got 2 nickels to rub together." "Exactly." She leaned forward. "What if someone wanted to make sure you could keep giving Charlie free coffee forever? No strings, no takeovers. Just, help." Joe studied her face for a long moment, then looked at the rich man. "This some kind of tax write-off for you?" The man shook his head. "It's a thank you. To people like you. Like her." He gestured to the woman. "Because 30 years ago, I was Charlie." The diner fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerators. Joe wiped his hands on his apron, considering. Finally, he grunted. "I'll think about it. But first," he pointed at the rich man's designer shoes. "You ever flipped a burger in those?" The boy snorted. The woman hid a smile. "Didn't think so." Joe shoved a spatula into the man's hand. "You wanna understand my diner? Get behind the grill. Lunch rush starts in 20. What followed was the most surreal hour of the woman's life, watching the billionaire businessman fumble with hash browns while she and Joe laughed over the counter. The boy took orders with surprising charm, and when Charlie woke up, he got a free meal courtesy of the world's most nervous celebrity cook. As they flew back that evening, the rich man's sleeves were rolled up, grease stains on his expensive pants. "Well," he sighed, "that could have gone worse." The woman stared out at the sunset, a strange warmth in her chest. She'd expected fancy boardrooms and contracts today. Instead, she'd found something far more surprising, proof that beneath all the wealth and helicopters, this man's heart still remembered what it was like to be hungry. And maybe, just maybe, hers was starting to remember how to hope. The following week passed in a whirlwind of helicopter rides, small-town diners, and more coffee than the woman had drunk in her entire life. Each place they visited had its own story, a widow keeping her husband's legacy alive, immigrant sisters serving their mother's recipes, a retired teacher feeding kids who couldn't afford school lunches. But today was different. The woman stood outside a boarded-up diner in a part of the city even the rich man's security team eyed nervously. Graffiti covered the walls, and the smell of garbage hung thick in the air. "This is the place?" the boy asked, shifting from foot to foot. The man checked his tablet. "According to our research, yes. Martha's Kitchen. Closed 6 months ago after the owner passed." He glanced at the woman. "Her daughter refused our calls. She studied the building's broken windows. So why are we here?" "Because yesterday, I got this." He showed her a grainy security camera photo, a thin figure slipping through the diner's back door at night. Someone's living in there. Before she could respond, movement caught her eye. A face appeared briefly in an upstairs window, then vanished. The woman made a decision. Wait here. Ignoring the man's protest, she picked her way through the debris to the back entrance. The door hung crooked on its hinges. She knocked gently. Hello? We're not here to cause trouble. Silence. Then a girl's voice, sharp with fear, go away. The woman recognized that tone, the same one the boy had used when he first came to her diner. She crouched to peer through the crack in the door. In the shadows, she could just make out a teenager clutching a baseball bat. I used to run a diner too, she said softly. Elm Street Grill. The grill only worked on one side, and the coffee was terrible, but... A chain rattled inside. You're the lady from the news, the girl interrupted. The one who got rich feeding some kid. The woman blinked. There's news about me? Behind her, the rich man cleared his throat. Local human interest piece. My PR team may have helped. The door creaked open a few inches, revealing a gaunt face with wary eyes. The girl couldn't have been older than 17. If you're here to take pictures for your charity crap, forget it. The woman shook her head. We're here because this was your mom's place, right? Martha? The girl's grip on the bat tightened. What do you know about my mom? Nothing, the woman admitted. But I know what it's like to lose a diner. She gestured to the peeling paint. This was yours, wasn't it? Before the bank took it? Something in the girl's face crumpled. The bat lowered slightly. I've been squatting here since the funeral. They're supposed to demolish it next week. The rich man stepped forward, then wisely stopped when the bat came back up. We could help reopen it, he said carefully. Full ownership in your name. No debt. The girl laughed bitterly. Yeah, right. What's the catch? No catch, the woman said. She reached slowly into her pocket and pulled out a grease-stained envelope, the first check the man had given her. This is real. And so is the offer. For a long moment, the only sound was a distant siren. Then the girl's shoulders sagged. My mom, she used to feed everyone. Even when we could barely pay rent. Her voice cracked. I just didn't want her place to become some Starbucks. The woman understood then why they'd been led here. Not just to help, but to remember, this wasn't about saving buildings. It was about saving legacies. She turned to the man. We're staying here tonight. His eyebrows shot up. In there? It's not. Safe? Clean? Fancy? She smiled at the girl. Sounds like my first apartment. That night, by flashlight in the derelict diner, they ate takeout on the floor while the girl, whose name was Tessa, told them about her mother's famous peach pie and the regulars who'd been like family. The rich man listened intently, occasionally making notes on his phone. The boy fell asleep leaning against an old jukebox. As dawn filtered through the broken windows, Tessa finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air, why are you really doing all this? The man didn't answer immediately. He walked to the diner's boarded-up front window and pried loose a small piece of wood. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating the dusty counter where Martha had once served her coffee. Because hungry people don't just need food, he said quietly. They need to be seen. Your mother knew that. So did hers. He nodded at the woman. And one day, you will too. Tessa looked at them all, the billionaire, the boy, the diner owner who still smelled like yesterday's fry grease, and for the first time, her eyes held something like hope. Okay, she whispered. Let's rebuild my mom's diner. The demolition notice still hung on Martha's kitchen when the crew arrived at dawn. Tessa ripped it down with a satisfying tear, crumpling the paper in her fist. First victory, she muttered. The woman smiled, handing her a hard hat. Plenty more to go. For 3 days, they worked non-stop. Construction crews repaired the roof while volunteers scrubbed decades of grease from the walls. The rich man, who the woman had secretly started calling the boss in her head, had somehow gotten the city to fast-track permits. The boy proved surprisingly handy with a paint roller, though he'd somehow gotten more paint on himself than the walls. On the 4th morning, the woman arrived to find Tessa alone in the half-finished kitchen, staring at an old recipe book. "Everything okay?" she asked. Tessa traced her mother's handwriting on a yellowed page. "What if I can't do this? Mom never wrote down the pie crust recipe right. She said the secret was in the hands, not the measurements." The woman understood that fear better than anyone. She pulled up a stool. "When I first took over my diner, I burned 3 batches of biscuits before the old cook took pity on me." She pointed to a faint scar on her wrist. "That's from the 4th batch." Tessa almost smiled. "What happened with the 5th batch?" "I cried, threw them out, and served toast instead." The woman shrugged. People still came back. A commotion at the front interrupted them. The boss was arguing with a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit. "Not how zoning works," the stranger was saying. "This entire block is slated for redevelopment." The woman stepped between them. "Problem?" The stranger gave her a dismissive once-over. "And you are?" "Someone who actually knows how to run a diner," she shot back. "Unlike developers who tear down history for condos." The boss hid a smile. "Ms. Wilkins, meet Mr. Hendricks. He represents the company that owns the surrounding properties." Hendricks adjusted his tie. "Be reasonable. We'll compensate the girl fairly, but this eyesore doesn't belong in our new retail complex." Tessa's face went pale. "Your complex? My mom built this place with her." A crash interrupted her. The boy stood amid shattered tiles, a sledgehammer dangling from his hands. "Oops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Guess we'll have to replace these now." Hendricks scowled. "This is exactly what I mean. You people don't understand the value of—" "Actually," the boss cut in, his voice suddenly icy, "I understand perfectly. Because as of an hour ago, my company now owns controlling interest in yours." He handed Hendricks a business card. "Feel free to take this up with the new board at Monday's meeting." The woman's jaw dropped. Even Tessa looked stunned. Hendricks sputtered. "You can't just. Watch me." The boss turned his back on him, addressing the construction crew. "Double shifts today. I want this place ready for a soft opening by Sunday." As Hendricks stormed out, the woman pulled the boss aside. "You bought his entire company? Just like that?" He shrugged. "I told you, I protect what matters." Then, quieter, "And I may have had some past dealings with that particular developer. Let's just say he deserved this." The boy hooped, swinging his sledgehammer at another doomed tile. Tessa laughed, a real, full laugh the woman hadn't heard before. But later, as they took a break on the newly repaired back steps, Tessa grew serious. "That guy wasn't wrong about one thing. This neighborhood is changing. What if Mom's regulars don't come back?" The woman thought of her own diner, of the familiar faces she'd served for years. "Then you feed the new people," she said simply. "Hunger doesn't care about zip codes." Sunday arrived in a blur of last-minute chaos. The oven broke twice, the health inspector showed up early, and the neon PIE sign short-circuited during testing. But at 5 p.m. exactly, Martha's Kitchen reopened its doors. The woman expected a slow trickle of customers. Instead, a line stretched around the block, old regulars mixed with curious newcomers, all drawn by word of the diner's miraculous return. Tessa froze at the sight. "I can't." The woman pressed a spatula into her hand. Yes, you can. Your mom's in every brick of this place. She's got your back. And somehow, amid the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation, something magical happened. The woman watched as Tessa greeted customers with growing confidence, as the boss bussed tables without complaint, as the boy charmed everyone with his terrible attempts at waitressing. At closing time, Tessa collapsed onto a stool, exhausted but glowing. She pulled out her mother's recipe book and flipped to a blank page. In careful letters, she wrote, "First day. We did okay." The woman squeezed her shoulder. Better than okay. Outside, under the newly repaired neon sign, the boss lit a rare cigarette. "One diner down," he said. "Dozens to go." The woman studied him, the tired lines around his eyes, the grease stain on his sleeve from where he'd helped fix the fryer. This wasn't some billionaire's pet project anymore. It had become something real. "So," she said, "where to next?" He grinned, stubbing out the cigarette. "Somewhere with better coffee, hopefully." The success of Martha's Kitchen should have felt like a victory. But as the woman sat in the back of the boss's luxury car, now permanently stained with drywall dust and coffee spills, a nagging unease settled in her chest. The boy noticed first. "You've been quiet for, 3 whole states," he said, poking her shoulder from the adjacent seat. "You sick of us already?" She forced a smile. "Just thinking." Across from her, the boss looked up from his tablet. About how easy that was," she admitted. "One phone call from you and the city forgave all of Martha's back taxes. A snap of your fingers and we had contractors working overtime." She met his gaze. "What happens when you're not around to snap your fingers?" The car fell silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt. The boss set down his tablet. "You think this is all just my money talking?" "I think," she said carefully, "that most people don't get fairy godfathers." Tessa, who'd been dozing against the window, stirred. "She's got a point. You bought an entire company because some guy was rude." "That's not why the boss cut himself off, running a hand through his hair. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "There are things I haven't told you." The boy stiffened. "Dad. It's time." He tapped the divider, signaling the driver to pull over at the next rest stop. Under the flickering lights of a roadside picnic shelter, the truth came out in pieces. The boss hadn't just been a hungry kid when the woman fed him all those years ago, he'd been on the run. His father, a small-time con artist, had dragged him across 6 states before abandoning him at that diner. "The man who took pity on me?" He laughed bitterly. "He was my first foster father. Made me work 16-hour days in his factory for my keep." His voice dropped. "I ran away from that too." The woman's stomach twisted. She'd imagined him as a success story, the poor boy who made good. Not this fractured journey. "So how'd you?" The boy gestured at their surroundings, the cars, the wealth, all of it. The boss's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I got lucky. Met a woman at a bus station who shared her last dollar with me. Later, when I could, I tracked her down to repay her." He shrugged. "She asked me to help someone else instead. So I did. And somewhere along the way, I realized helping people could be a business model." Tessa frowned. "What kind of business?" "One where I buy failing companies not to gut them, but to give workers fair wages. Where I invest in neighborhoods instead of displacing them." He looked at the woman. "Where diners like yours become community anchors instead of casualties." The woman exhaled slowly. It made sense now, his intensity, his need to control every variable. This wasn't just philanthropy to him. It was atonement. The boy kicked at the gravel. "You never told me any of this. I wanted you to have a clean slate." The boss's voice cracked. To be better than me. Silence settled over them, heavy with unspoken questions. It was Tessa who finally spoke. So what's the plan, then? We just keep riding around like some kind of diner rescue squad? The woman expected another grand speech. Instead, the boss reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn photograph, the original diner where it all began, now a parking lot. I want to rebuild this one first. The place where he nodded at the woman, worked. Where it started. The woman's breath caught. She hadn't set foot in that city in 25 years. Hadn't dared. The boy studied her face. You don't want to go back. It wasn't a question. She thought of the alley behind that diner where she'd hidden from her abusive boyfriend. Of the bus ticket she'd bought with stolen tips. Of the life she'd built under a new name in a new town. The boss's eyes widened. You're her. The waitress who disappeared. The police report. I didn't steal anything, she said sharply. Then, softer, just my own life back. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Tessa stood, brushing chips from her jeans. Well. Guess we're going on a field trip to settle some old scores, Pennsylvania. The woman should have felt cornered. Instead, something loosened in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized was there. The boss extended his hand. We don't have to go. But if you do, you won't be alone this time. She looked at their faces, the billionaire with his ghosts, the runaway boy who'd found her, the orphaned girl who'd inherited a diner. This strange, makeshift family. Okay, she whispered. Let's go home. The town hadn't changed. That was the first thing that struck the woman as their caravan rolled down Main Street, the same cracked sidewalks, the same faded awning over the drugstore. Even the smell was identical, fried food and diesel fumes from the bus depot. The boy pressed his face to the car window. This is where you're from? It's like, aggressively average. Tessa elbowed him. Shut up. It's got character. The woman said nothing. Her palms left damp prints on her jeans. The boss had been uncharacteristically quiet since her confession. Now he pointed to a vacant lot where weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. That's the spot. The Beacon Diner. She remembered the chipped Formica counters, the jukebox that only played Patsy Cline, the way the night cook would let her sneak pie when the manager wasn't looking. Remembered, too, running through that back alley with nothing but a stolen tip jar and the clothes on her back. A hand touched her shoulder, the boss. We can still turn around. She shook her head. Not this time. They set up headquarters in the only motel in town, its neon vacancy sign buzzing like an angry insect. The plan was simple: track down the diner's old owner, see if he'd sell the land, rebuild something new. But small towns have long memories. The woman felt eyes on her at the gas station, heard whispers trail her in the grocery store. By sunset, someone had recognized her. Jenny? Jenny Larson? She turned to face a gray-haired woman clutching a pharmacy bag. One of the Beacon's regulars, Mrs. Pelletier, who'd always ordered tea with exactly 3 sugars. The woman swallowed. It's just Jen now. Mrs. Pelletier's eyes flicked to the boss's expensive car, then back to her face. Heard you got mixed up with some rich fella. Her voice dropped. You know he's still here, right? Your ex. Ice flooded her veins. Back at the motel, she paced like a caged animal. We're leaving. Tonight. The boss blocked the door. Tell me what happened. Really happened. So she did. The whole ugly story, the controlling boyfriend who'd gotten her the waitress job, the escalating violence, the night he'd locked her in the diner's walk-in freezer as punishment. How she'd escaped only because the night cook took pity on her. The boy looked sick. And the police just. He was a cop, she said flatly. Silence. Tessa stood abruptly. "I'll get the car started." But the boss didn't move. "What if," he said slowly, "we didn't run?" It was madness. Reckless. Dangerous. And yet. By noon the next day, reporters from 3 regional newspapers stood on the vacant lot as the boss announced his plans for the Second Chance Diner, a training restaurant for survivors of domestic abuse, staffed by counselors and culinary professionals. The woman stood beside him, knees trembling but voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "This place took so much from me. Now I wanted to give something back." Cameras flashed. The mayors shook their hands. And in the back of the crowd, a hulking figure in mirrored sunglasses watched silently before disappearing into a squad car. That night, as they celebrated at the motel with pizza and soda, the woman finally breathed. "It's really over." The boss handed her a Coke. "Not quite." He nodded toward the door. Outside, under the flickering motel sign, stood the night cook, now a grizzled old man with a walker. "Heard you was back," he grunted. Then, softer, "always wondered if you made it." She hugged him so hard he wheezed. 6 months later, the Second Chance Diner opened its doors, all gleaming chrome and warm lighting, with a discreet security system and panic buttons at every station. The woman stood behind the counter where her nightmare had begun, now wearing a manager's name tag. The boy, who'd insisted on being head busboy, bumped her elbow. "First customers here." She turned to see Mrs. Pelletier settling at the counter with her familiar smile. "Heard the pie's good here." The woman slid a plate across the counter. "On the house." As the diner filled with laughter and the smell of fresh coffee, she caught the boss's eye across the room. He raised his mug in a silent toast. Somewhere, in another small town, another diner was struggling. Another hungry kid needed feeding. Another story waited to unfold. But for today, in this place that had once been her prison, she was finally free.